What's up, y'all? One of my friends suggested that I do a video talking about movies I recommend on Netflix, and I figured with us going into the weekend here, maybe you don't have anything going on. Maybe right now would be a good time for me to give you some recs. So that's what I'm doing here today. I'm only gonna list like 7 or 8 movies because if I'm just talking about movies I like that are on Netflix, I could sit here all day. But I've narrowed it down to specific genres and picked a movie that's on Netflix that I really enjoyed that falls into that category. And the first thing that I want to cover is a movie that's leaving very soon, and that is Steve Jobs. Not to be confused with the Ashton Kutcher biopic, this is the 2015 movie directed by Danny Boyle and starring Michael Fassbender in the title role. And I really like this movie because of how different they approached the biopic. Instead of going with a standard, this is whenever he started Apple, this is whenever he got kicked out of Apple, he got brought back, they decide to cover the story of Steve Jobs on 3 different launch dates that are critical to Apple as a company as we know it now. Michael Fassbender, in my opinion, delivers a career best performance here. He got nominated for an Oscar for this movie. Kate Winslet is fantastic in a supporting role, and it's really the only Steve Jobs biopic that I feel like actually does the guy some justice and also holds his feet to the fire, because he was far from a perfect person. If you know anything about him, you know that he was kind of a jerk at times, but that's not to say that he wasn't a genius and a revolutionary. Like anybody, he had things about him that were positive and things about him where you're gonna watch this movie and be like, dude, what are you doing? I really like his interactions with the engineers during this film. There's a specific scene where he is trying to get one of his engineers to get Siri to talk, or I think it's Siri, something like that. He needs a computer to talk, and he's told on the day of launch, only hours before, that it's not going to work. And from everything that I've watched and read, this is how Steve Jobs would function on a day like this if this were to happen. And so I think that it's really, really fair as a biopic and just well made and very different from any standard biopic that you're going to see. So I'd recommend that before it leaves on the 15th. Next, I want to talk about something new, and this isn't something that's being released this weekend. It's just from the last few months, and it's on Netflix now. It's called Emily the Criminal. I have a review that I did back in August for this. It stars Aubrey Plaza as a woman who's fallen on hard times and takes to helping out with this credit card fraud scheme. And it's just a really solid, short, well-made movie. Like, if you just have an hour and a half of time, this movie hits all the beats that you want it to. It's an enjoyable time. It's not by any means a Best Picture movie, but Aubrey Plaza is fantastic in the film, and it's just one of those crime movies that keeps your attention and opens up an underground world that you didn't know was there. So that's something that's come out fairly recently that I think just about anyone can enjoy. Next, let's go over specific genres. I'll start off with comedy. Keep it light at first with The Nice Guys. This movie is criminally underrated, okay? You got Ryan Gosling at the peak of his powers in 2016, Russell Crowe, one of the greatest actors of all time, an early performance from a young actress named Andre Rice. I could be butchering her name, but it's one of the best child performances that I've seen in several years. She really hasn't gotten the work after this movie that I think she deserves. She's been in the Spider-Man movies, but just as Betty Brant, I think the name of the character is, she doesn't really do anything in those movies. She deserves a bigger role, but you have an early performance from her. You also have Matt Bomer with a fantastic turn as a villain here. He is great. Very unnerving, seems invincible. You also have Keith David here, which, I mean, come on. Who doesn't love seeing Keith David in their movie? Basically, the premise of this is it takes place in the 70s, and there's a murder that happens. Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe are 2 different private investigators that, in a turn of events, decide to investigate the crime. And Russell Crowe is kind of the hard ass in there. He's an older dude, and Ryan Gosling is a young father. He's a bit of a more bumbling buffoon, if you will. And the chemistry between the two of them is lights out. It's great. And whenever this movie came out, it made no money at all, which doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Ryan Gosling is one of the biggest stars in the world. You would imagine whenever he comes out with a movie that it's going to make at least like $200 million maybe. But no, this movie was a hard flop. It was produced with a budget of $50 million and only made 62. which, that 50 million doesn't even include marketing. You have to factor in, the theater's cut and everything. So this movie lost money for the studio. But it's seriously one of the most original, funny comedy movies that I've seen over the last several years. I have a lot of confidence that if you know nothing about this movie and you just turn it on, you will have a good time. It's very, very good. Next up, let's talk a little crime movies. I already recommended Emily the Criminal. Let me recommend a classic here with Reservoir Dogs. For those of you that don't know, this was Quentin Tarantino's first ever feature-length film. And most of the movie takes place in this one room. There's a heist that goes wrong, and these guys who are all dressed up in suits, they're dressed to the nines. They're all trapped there. Some of them got shot, some of them are hurt, some of them are dead on the street. And it's basically them trying to figure out who ratted them out here now that they're stuck in this one room and they can't leave. Some of them are psychos. One of them is a rat, and you're kind of guessing who it is at first until the movie reveals it, and then it's like, oh my gosh, is this guy gonna get found out? And you get that Tarantino dialogue that we've all come to know and love here in a very early stage of his career. And I have a great respect for movies that basically take place in one room. I mean, we have flashbacks to diners, and whenever the heist goes wrong, all of that good stuff. I think one of the characters walks outside at one point, but it's hard to make a movie where the entire thing takes place in one room, because basically if the writing isn't good, then the movie's gonna suck, because there's not a whole lot going on there with the camera work. Like, yes, there's something to be said about the artwork of camera work in one room, but you don't have those great landscape shots. You're not getting a Power of the Dog here whenever it comes to cinematography. And the dialogue of this movie keeps you in it, and that's part of what I love about Tarantino movies, is movies that are heavy with dialogue tend to be labeled as boring, but he has a way of just keeping you roped in. And it's also cool to see what Tarantino made at this very early stage of his career, knowing now where his career was going. So yeah, that's on Netflix. I guess going from crime over to action, let's talk about Minority Report, the Steven Spielberg movie that takes place in the 2050s, and Tom Cruise is, I guess, the police commissioner, or he's a police sergeant, something like that, for a new police division called Pre-Crime. And basically, they can look into the future and see a crime that's about to happen, so they arrest the person before they commit the crime. Only the catch of the movie is they find out that Tom Cruise is supposed to commit a murder at one point, so he needs to be arrested. So he goes on the run trying to figure out what happened for him to maybe murder someone. So he's racing against his own department. He's trying to figure out what's going on. Colin Farrell is in a supporting role here as another member of the police station, or I think he's a member of the FBI, something like that. He's basically the one hunting down Tom Cruise throughout the movie. And this movie's great for a lot of reasons. It's Steven Spielberg, man. The cinematography is incredible. The visual effects are a little dated now, but it was released 20 years ago. Okay, I think we can get past that. The visual effects for the time were groundbreaking, and Tom Cruise in an action movie, come on, y'all. It's all good stuff here. I miss that era where we were getting Tom Cruise, Steven Spielberg action movies. Like, Tom Cruise, I know you're 60 years old, I know you're doing Mission Impossible movies for the rest of your life, but can you please just do another action movie with Steven Spielberg? We need more good talents working together today. And this is just a great sci-fi movie with a cool, realistic tale that no one else has really done. There's no other movie that comes to mind that's even close to something like this in terms of quality that covers a story similar in nature. So yeah, Minority Report. Highly recommend that. And I guess, staying with the theme of Tom Cruise, let's talk about romantic comedies with Jerry Maguire. And there's an old saying that I like, that cliches are cliches for a reason. I like to translate that over to classics are classics for a reason. This movie is just one of the best rom-coms I've ever seen. It's cliche, it's sappy, it's all that stuff. It has cringy dialogue, but you know what? It's Tom Cruise, Renee Zellweger, Cuba Gooding Jr. Tom Cruise is a sports agent, which I love. It's a different take on a romantic comedy, and it's also based on a true story. I actually had a professor in college in my sports management class that knew the guy and I believe went to school with the real-life Jerry Maguire, and it was fascinating to hear about the actual guy behind this, because apparently family is just a fantastic sports agent. I don't know how much of the romance was true, but a lot of this movie, whenever it comes to him working at a major agency and then deciding that he wanted to venture out on his own, all of that is real. So it kind of adds that layer to this movie. And I mean, Cuba Gooding Jr. won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for this movie. So he's great in the role. He plays a wide receiver who's kind of over the hill. He's, I think, in his early 30s. He's trying to get his next big contract, but the Cardinals don't really want him anymore. He's the only client of Jerry's that decides to stay with him after Jerry leaves the major firm that he works for. And then Jerry's romantic interest is the only fellow employee that decides to follow him whenever he leaves the firm. And, you know, that's where that romance develops. And I like the element that Jerry has to find a balance between caring for his one client who is basically the only thing keeping him afloat at this point, and trying to, you know, grow this relationship with Renee Zellweger's character. I like that element there. It's not all about the romance. So if you're looking for a great rom-com, this is a classic one. You cannot go wrong here. I want to throw in a nice inspirational movie here, and that is Lion. It is a fairly recent movie. It's from 2016. It stars Dev Patel, one of the great young talents in the industry right now. Lion is the true story of a man who is trying to track down his biological family after being separated from them for 25 years and being raised in Australia. And it's cool. He utilizes the internet. He goes actually boots on the ground to some places to try to figure out where his family might be, because whenever he was very young, he was adopted by an Australian family. And just because he's trying to track down his real family now as a full-grown adult doesn't mean that he doesn't love his mom and dad, or I guess his adopted mom and dad. His mom is played by Nicole Kidman, who was nominated for an Oscar here. Dev Patel was also nominated for an Oscar. Really great performances there. It's just a feel-good movie about this guy trying to find where he comes from. And it's also something very unique. It's one of those stories that sounds so crazy to be actually true. Like, this guy, after 25 years, is gonna be able to track down his family that live in like a remote village in India after he's lived in Australia. That's pretty wild. All in all, it was nominated for 6 Oscars. It's a great movie. If you haven't heard of it before, I would definitely recommend this if you need a little feel-good in your life. Last but surely not least, I'm gonna recommend something dumb here. I'm not saying that this is a good movie. I'm saying that if you want to put something on and turn your brain off, then Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. It's on Netflix. It's not good, but it's on Netflix. So if you're doing household chores, this is something that you could put on there. I actually really like the first Transformers, and this movie, to an extent, is a victim of the writer's strike of 2008. So they kind of just went into shooting this movie without a script that was really solid. But hey, idea for you. Maybe you delay the movie. But yeah, come on. You got Shia LaBeouf screaming at Optimus Prime here. It's the golden era of Hollywood. So yeah, those are my Netflix recommendations. Thank you so much for watching this up to this point. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Happy streaming. Subscribe if you're not already. I'll see you next time.